Not the chill that makes your fingers tremble, but the cold that seeps into your soul, the kind that tests whether you were ever meant to live at all. You've heard stories of frontier life, hard winters, snow-covered cabins, frozen rivers, brave men and women building new worlds on untamed land. But no one told you what it felt like when the fire went out at 3 a.m. When you woke to silence, no crackle, no warmth, and realized that the next few hours would decide if your family lived to see the dawn. That silence wasn't peaceful. It was death, waiting. The Morrison family learned that truth in the winter of 1883, deep in the Montana frontier. Outside, the temperature had fallen to 40 below zero. Inside, the last ember in the iron stove pulsed weakly, like a dying heartbeat. Thomas Morrison, the father, stirred in the darkness. He didn't wake from rest, he woke from instinct. Because men like him didn't sleep through the night. They guarded it. They watched it. He rose quietly, his breath turning white in the frigid air. He crossed the wooden floor barefoot, every step a shock of pain. But pain was better than the cold. The cold was a killer, slow, beautiful, merciless. He bent down to the stove, opened the small iron door, and saw it, one coal still glowing, faintly red, buried in ash. He cupped his hands around it like a priest protecting holy fire. He blew. Once. Twice. Again. Until the spark became a flicker, and the flicker a flame. He fed it slivers of birch bark, pine needles, and finally, a log split thin enough to catch. The room began to breathe again. His wife stirred. His children moved under quilts of fur and wool. They were alive, for now. That's how frontier families survived the nights that erased the week. Not through luck. Not through faith alone. But through an understanding of something primal, a secret balance between man, fire, and the void. Because in that world, the cold wasn't just weather. It was a test of worth. And only those who remembered the ancient ways, the ones buried in forgotten rituals of heat, breath, and silence, made it through till morning. And tonight, I'll show you what they knew, the forbidden knowledge of survival the modern world has tried to bury under convenience, comfort, and electric heat. Are you ready to remember? The first rule of survival on the frontier wasn't written in any book. It was whispered, from father to son, mother to daughter, passed down through breath and memory. The cold is not your enemy, they said. It is your mirror. The Morrison family understood that truth. The walls of their log cabin weren't walls, they were shields against eternity. Each log, hand-cut and sealed with mud, moss, and horsehair, wasn't random construction. It was an ancient pattern, the same one Vikings used in Iceland, and tribes in Siberia carved into the bones of their dwellings. They knew how to trap warmth like it was a spirit. First, they built low ceilings, so heat couldn't rise and escape. Second, they layered their walls with animal hides, hair side inward, trapping micropockets of air, primitive insulation more efficient than anything in your home right now. Third, they never let the stove go dark. Even when it seemed cruel, they sacrificed sleep to feed that one ember, because once the flame died, everything died with it. But what most people never learned is what they burned. It wasn't just wood. Wood burns too fast. The secret fuel, the one they never told outsiders, was bone. Animal bones, crushed and mixed with fat, formed a slow-burning paste. When ignited, it smoldered for hours, even in the blackest cold. And some whispered that the strongest heat came from bones buried too deep in the forest, from places where even wolves didn't go. Thomas Morrison didn't speak of such things. But when his wife once asked why the fire sometimes burned blue, he only said one word, an offering. Because survival in the old world wasn't just science. It was ritual. Every night, before sleep, Thomas would circle the stove 3 times, whispering the same words his father once spoke in the Pennsylvania wilderness. Words meant to bind the flame to the house. He said them in the language of his ancestors, a language he claimed came from before Europe had kings, before churches had names. Modern people laugh at that now. They don't believe fire can be alive. They don't believe warmth has memory. But the Morrison family knew. Every fire carries something, the hunger of the one who lit it. And if that hunger ever weakens, the flame dies, and so does the man. You think this is about winter. It's not. It's about power, ancient, invisible power, and whether you can still command it in a world that's forgotten the cost. They told you the frontier was about expansion, brave men claiming wild land, building a nation from nothing. But that's the lie. The frontier wasn't expansion. It was exile. It was where the unwanted went. The mad, the broken, the outcast. The ones who didn't obey the soft rules of cities and governments. They were sent west, not to build, but to disappear. And yet, some of them didn't vanish. Some of them thrived in the frost. Because they discovered something out there, something that changed them. By 1883, the Morrison family had already been in Montana for 6 years. 6 winters of silence, isolation, and endless dark. But in that time, Thomas Morrison had begun to change. He spoke less. He slept lighter. He started writing symbols on the inside of the cabin door, not words, but marks that looked older than English, older than Latin. When his eldest son asked what they meant, Thomas said quietly, "They keep us awake." Awake. It wasn't just about surviving the cold anymore. It was about staying conscious, guarding against something that tried to put men into a kind of sleep. Out there, where the night stretched for 18 hours and even wolves went silent, a different kind of cold crept in. A psychological cold. It didn't freeze your body, it froze your will. Most settlers who didn't understand that, didn't last. They were found days later, frozen in sitting positions, eyes open, faces calm. Not terrified, tranquil. Thomas believed something in the deep winter was testing men's minds. Not nature, not the cold, something older. Something that fed on surrender. So he began what he called the vigil. Every few nights, he'd wake his family. No matter how cold it was, they'd sit in a circle around the stove. They wouldn't speak. They'd just watch the fire. Sometimes for 10 minutes. Sometimes for hours. He said if the flame flickered left, it meant the cold was probing the walls. If it flickered right, it meant the house still had strength. To an outsider, it would look like madness, frontier superstition. But those who practiced the vigil survived. And when the next storm came, the kind that buried entire cabins under 10 feet of snow, the Morrisons were ready. Because the vigil wasn't just about heat. It was training. It was psychological armor. The same kind you'll need if you ever want to survive your own frontier. You don't live in a frozen wilderness anymore. But don't be fooled, you're surrounded by a different kind of cold. The kind built by systems designed to keep you numb, comfortable, obedient. And most men have already fallen asleep. They thought the vigil was just a superstition, something lonely settlers did to keep from going insane. But they were wrong. It wasn't madness. It was defense. When Thomas Morrison spoke of the cold, he didn't mean the temperature outside. He meant it. The force that moves silently through every empire, every system, every generation. The thing that drains the fire out of men and calls it progress. In the frontier, it came as frost. In your world, it comes as comfort. The vigil trained the mind to see the difference between warmth and sedation, between being alive and merely existing. Because the cold always starts the same way, not with pain, but with relief. That's how it kills you. Do you understand? When the frost first touches your skin, it feels good. It numbs the nerves. It whispers, stop fighting. Rest. Let go. That's how the Morrisons' neighbors died. Not from hunger or wolves, but from surrender. And now, in the 21st century, it's no different. The fire hasn't gone out, but the world has convinced you to stop feeding it. They tell you your survival doesn't depend on vigilance anymore. That the systems are here to protect you, your thermostat, your paycheck, your algorithm, your news feed. But what if those systems are the modern frost? What if every new convenience is another layer of snow? Think about it, the same way the cold smothers a cabin, your comforts smother your consciousness. Notifications instead of instincts. Consumption instead of creation. Warmth without fire. Thomas Morrison understood this before the words psychological warfare even existed. He'd say, if a man forgets to guard his flame, someone else will guard it for him, and then he'll never see it again. That's what he meant when he wrote those symbols. They weren't protection spells. They were reminders, primitive affirmations carved in wood: stay awake. Keep watch. Remember who you are. But here's the secret no historian dares to write: the vigil wasn't born on the frontier. It came before it. Thomas's grandfather carried it from Europe, where small villages once practiced midnight flame circles, rituals outlawed by the church in the 1600s for keeping men awake to forbidden knowledge. They called it heresy. But men like Thomas called it truth. The cold outside was only half the enemy. The real battle was keeping the fire inside from being taken by anything or anyone. And the deeper you understand that, the more you'll start to see what the Morrison family truly discovered out there in the endless white, that survival is not about warmth. It's about will. The vigil didn't die with the Morrisons. It spread, quietly, invisibly, like the ember it was meant to protect. When the next generation left the frontier and drifted eastward, they carried the ritual in their bones. They stopped calling it the vigil. They called it the watch. Men in small towns and mining camps began gathering once a month, not to drink or preach, but to sit in silence around a single flame. No words. No music. Just stillness and the sound of breathing. They said it built resistance, not to the cold, but to influence. See, they'd noticed something strange. The longer they stayed out there, the less the frost frightened them, and the more they could sense other kinds of cold. When traveling officials came selling protection charters, or preachers appeared insisting on new moral codes, the watchers could feel when something wasn't real. When the words were meant to make men weaker, not stronger. The watch became a way to detect deception, not through logic, but through temperature. When someone lied, they said the flame bent slightly toward them. When someone spoke truth, it burned steady and upright. Laugh if you want. But even the military took notice. By 1899, small vigil circles were reported in frontier forts. Soldiers claimed they could train their awareness through controlled cold exposure, through the quiet rhythm of breath and fire. Sound familiar? Modern psychologists call it interoceptive conditioning, training your nervous system to sense subtle shifts in energy and emotion. Ancient soldiers called it listening to the fire. And here's the disturbing part: in 1903, a private document surfaced, an internal letter from the U.S. Bureau of Mental Health and Sanitation. It described a pattern of informal male gatherings practicing dangerous autohypnotic awareness, possibly subversive to state cohesion. Translation? They feared the watch. Because men who can feel truth cannot be controlled. So the state did what it always does when it meets something it can't own. It erased it. By 1910, frontier circles had vanished. Their leaders were called lunatics, isolationists, radicals. Their writings, burned. And yet, fragments survived, in family journals, in war letters, in the quiet rituals of men who still light a single candle before dawn and stare into it without moving. Maybe you've done it yourself, without knowing why. Maybe something deep inside you remembered. Because the watch was never just a ritual. It was rebellion, against cold governments, cold ideologies, and the slow freezing of the human will. They wanted to extinguish it. But you can't kill fire by denying its existence. You can only starve it. And that's exactly what they did next, not through war, but through warmth. Warmth became the new weapon. When the 20th century dawned, the age of fire ended, replaced by switches, levers, and invisible grids humming with artificial heat. Men no longer needed to tend the flame. They could summon warmth at will. And that is when they began to die differently. Not of frostbite, but of forgetfulness. Governments and corporations had learned a secret that frontier men like Thomas Morrison had only whispered about. If you want to control a man, don't take his fire away, convince him he doesn't need it anymore. Comfort became the leash. Central heating, canned food, electricity, entertainment, all sold as progress. But progress has a price. It numbs you. It removes the small frictions that once forged strength, awareness, vigilance. When everything is provided, you stop providing for yourself. When you no longer fear the night, you stop watching the flame. They called it the age of convenience. But in truth, it was the age of cold disguise. By the 1950s, American homes were warmer than any cabin in Montana's history, yet the people inside were colder than ever. Men who once chopped wood now pushed buttons. Families who once gathered around firelight now stared into electric glow. And slowly, quietly, something ancient went missing. They stopped feeling. You see, warmth without effort doesn't comfort the soul, it sedates it. And sedation is the perfect tool of control. Governments learned it. Corporations perfected it. Psychologists documented it. By giving you everything, they made sure you'd never ask why. And the echoes of the watch, those old rituals of awareness and will, became inconvenient. Because a man who can sit still in silence, feel the temperature of truth, and see the manipulation beneath his comfort, is ungovernable. So they called it archaic. Primitive. Pointless. They gave you thermostats instead of instincts. TV dinners instead of discipline. And the fire, your sacred fire, was outsourced. But here's the darkest truth, they didn't just want you warm. They wanted you comfortable enough to forget you were cold. The system learned how to mimic warmth, through dopamine, screens, and approval. Through jobs that burn your time instead of wood. Through relationships that glow bright, then vanish like sparks in wind. They gave you endless warmth, but not one single ember. That's how the watch was broken. Not through persecution, through pleasure. And that's why you don't see it anymore. Because most men don't want the truth. They just want the illusion of heat, but every empire underestimates the fire it tries to extinguish. When the watch was erased from public life, it didn't die. It adapted. It went underground, re-emerging where men were once again stripped of comfort, warmth, and illusion, on the battlefields. World War I. The trenches of Verdun. Men buried in mud, surrounded by smoke and screams. The cold wasn't just in their bones, it was in their minds. Panic. Terror. Despair. That's where the inner vigil was reborn. Soldiers discovered that those who could sit silently in the dark before battle, those who could steady their breath and focus on one small flame, a match, a cigarette tip, even the reflection of fire on a rifle barrel, survived longer. They shot straighter. They panicked less. It wasn't superstition anymore. It was control, over pulse, over fear, over death itself. In secret units, soldiers began forming small, flame circles. They didn't talk. They didn't pray. They stared into fire and let their minds grow still. Some said it slowed time. Some said it sharpened vision. Commanders noticed. Psychologists studied it. And for the first time, science began to measure what ancient men had already known, that focus, awareness, and survival were all bound to the same energy. The British military called it psychophysical fortitude. The Germans called it inner heat. But in one classified U.S. Document, declassified decades later, it was called something else, the Morrison method. A forgotten name, from a forgotten frontier. That file described techniques eerily similar to what Thomas Morrison once practiced: exposure, breath control, stillness before dawn, and the visualization of internal fire. They said it could keep men alive under conditions that broke ordinary minds. But here's the part that never made it into history books: the file warned against using it on civilians. It claimed prolonged use could awaken non-conforming psychological independence, a state in which the subject no longer responds to external authority or social conditioning. Do you understand what that means? It means the inner vigil didn't just build survivors. It built free men. And freedom, true, ungovernable freedom, terrifies systems of control. So once again, it was buried. Classified, misdirected, rebranded as mindfulness, resilience training, stress reduction. They took the fire, and renamed it therapy. And you were never meant to know its origin, that the same practice that saved men from frost and war was also a weapon against manipulation itself. But here you are. Listening. Remembering. Feeling that ember inside your chest that refuses to go out. You're not supposed to feel it. But you do. That's the inner vigil waking up. After World War II, something changed. The guns went silent, but a new kind of war began, a war for the mind. The soldiers who returned home carried something dangerous inside them. Not trauma, not just memory, but awareness. They had seen what happens when comfort disappears, when survival depends on inner fire, not orders. They had practiced the inner vigil, whether they knew its name or not, and it had awakened something that couldn't be undone. These were men who couldn't be hypnotized by advertising jingles or patriotic slogans. They saw the machinery behind the message. They recognized manipulation when they felt it. They were dangerous, not to others, but to systems. And the systems noticed. By 1947, a quiet alliance formed between governments, corporations, and emerging media networks. They studied the human mind not to heal it, but to harness it. Project MKUltra, Operation Mockingbird, Tavistock experiments, they all began from one simple fear, that men who control their own focus cannot be controlled by anyone else. They couldn't stop the inner vigil by force. So they replaced it, with something that looked like freedom but wasn't. Television was their first weapon. They realized that if you could keep a man's eyes fixed on an artificial light, he'd forget the meaning of a real one. Every screen that flickered in post-war living rooms replaced the ancient fire circle. Every broadcast became a ritual of sedation. The cold had evolved again. No longer the frost of nature, or the fear of death, now it was the soft, glowing trance of endless comfort. The frontier man once stared into fire to awaken. The modern man stares into light to escape. The difference is everything. By the 1960s, even the language of awareness was twisted. The ancient discipline of the watch was renamed stress management. The inner vigil became relaxation. The focus once used to sharpen the mind was now used to numb it. And the men who tried to speak about it, veterans, thinkers, old practitioners, were labeled paranoid, unstable, fringe. Because if they told you the truth, that the light in your home is the same weapon once used to blind soldiers in interrogation chambers, you might start to see again. They couldn't allow that. So they built a society that never knows silence. Music everywhere. Notifications, chatter, constant hum. Because silence is where the ember lives. And if you ever sit still long enough, you'll feel it again. That pulse in your chest. That ancient warmth that doesn't come from electricity. That's the inner vigil calling you back. And the world you live in now, the digital empire of warmth without fire, was designed to drown it out. They learned something in the Cold War that no bullet could teach them, that if you want to conquer a nation, you don't freeze its people, you entertain them. It began quietly, invisibly, a new kind of frost, woven not from ice but from pleasure. Television, radio, advertising, Hollywood, all born from the same seed planted after the war, keep the masses warm, but not awake. Every image, every sound, every perfectly timed laugh track became a substitute for the fire. You no longer gathered around real light, you gathered around a screen. And while the glow felt familiar, it carried no heat. The new warmth was synthetic. Safe. Predictable. Controlled. In 1958, a former intelligence officer named Henry Clift wrote in a private memorandum, "The American home no longer needs the hearth. The television has replaced the flame. Whoever controls the broadcast controls the dream." Read that again. Whoever controls the broadcast, controls the dream. You think the watch disappeared because it was outdated? No. It was replaced, with programming. Literal programming. Every narrative was carefully crafted to make men forget the frontier inside themselves. To keep them distracted with stories that never required their own fire to survive. Heroes on screens fought their battles for them. Men stopped fighting inwardly. They stopped practicing the vigil. The frost had won. But not through fear. Through comfort. You see, control doesn't always look like chains or whips. Sometimes it looks like warmth, convenience, and laughter at the right moment. Every pleasure has a price, and that price is your vigilance. By the 1970s, this psychological frost had become global. Whole generations of men who once would have built, hunted, or endured were now glued to screens, applauding shadows of strength. The fire was gone, and the system smiled. They didn't have to silence you. You silenced yourself. And while you were watching the world was watching you. Every click, every preference, every emotion recorded and recycled into the next layer of warmth, the illusion that you are seen, valued, safe. But you're not safe. You're sedated. And sedation is colder than death. Because death ends the body. Sedation ends the will. The inner vigil warned about this a century before it happened. The moment a man stops choosing his fire, someone else chooses it for him. And tonight, as you listen to this, I need you to understand, this isn't just history. This is prophecy. The frost hasn't ended. It's inside your pocket, glowing in your hand. It whispers to you every time you reach for your phone. Stay warm. Stay entertained. Stay asleep. But if you've listened this far, you already know something's shifting. You're remembering the Ember. By the time the century turned digital, the frost no longer lived in winter. It lived in code. The systems that once ruled through steel and smoke evolved into something softer, something invisible. Algorithms became the new frost keepers, tending not to your body, but to your attention. They don't burn you. They don't freeze you. They feed you, exactly what keeps you still. Every swipe, every scroll, every perfectly timed notification is a snowflake in the blizzard designed to cover your inner flame. And like every true frontier storm, it whispers the same thing the Montana cold once told the Morrisons: stop moving. But this frost doesn't numb your fingers, it numbs your will. They've learned to read you better than you read yourself. Every hesitation, every burst of curiosity, every moment of loneliness, tracked, tagged, and mirrored back at you as content. Comfort on demand. Validation on tap. You're no longer surviving the night, you're surviving stimulation. And yet, you don't see it as control, because it doesn't hurt. It feels good. The frost of the frontier was honest, it would kill you quickly if you failed. This frost kills you slowly. The digital system studied the human mind the same way early settlers studied the land, mapping every ridge, every weakness, every hidden valley of desire. And they built their empire there. Not to enslave you, but to tend you. To keep you warm enough to never notice the cage. Every platform you use today is a hearth built by someone else. You sit by their fire, consume their stories, believe their warmth is your own. But it isn't. You don't own this fire. You rent it, with your attention. And attention is the only real currency left. Thomas Morrison once said, "A man who does not feed his own flame will kneel before another's." He didn't know how true that prophecy would become. Because now, every man kneels before the glow of his screen, a digital altar, a modern hearth. But unlike the frontier fire, this light doesn't give life. It takes it. It feeds on your focus, breath by breath, until you forget that there was ever a time you generated your own heat. And here's the part they'll never admit, every algorithm is built to mirror your weakness back to you. Not to teach you. Not to free you. But to keep you circling their flame instead of guarding your own. The frost has evolved into something perfect. No resistance. No rebellion. Just endless warmth. And yet, somewhere inside you, the ember still beats. You feel it when you look away from the screen. When you sit in silence and sense that something is missing, something ancient. That's your original fire, trying to breathe. And the moment you remember it, you become dangerous again. This is where most men fall asleep without realizing it. It's not the frost of cold or death that breaks you anymore. It's the frost of the mind, invisible, systematic, relentless. Every emotion you feel online, every rush of outrage, every flicker of desire, it's measured. Calculated. Programmed. Designed not to awaken you, but to fragment your attention, to scatter your fire across a million distractions. Your ancestors built fire to survive the cold. You scroll to survive boredom. The Morrison family once faced blizzards that could bury a cabin in hours. They had to strategize every breath, every movement. You face algorithms that bury your will in milliseconds, and you call it entertainment. It's not just the content. It's the rhythm. The pause. The constant pull of novelty. Every like you receive is a measured reinforcement, training you like a Pavlovian dog to seek approval instead of truth. Every comment, every share, every heart-shaped icon is a frost spike penetrating the flame of your autonomy. And you don't fight it. Because it doesn't hurt. The cold is most dangerous when it masquerades as comfort. Thomas Morrison once whispered that fire could not be stolen, only ignored. And that's exactly what happens today. Men ignore their inner flame while systems cultivate the illusion of warmth. And the world applauds their obedience. The architecture of this frost is subtle. It's emotional manipulation disguised as community. It's dopamine engineered to replace discipline. It's pleasure twisted into slavery. And yet, there are echoes of resistance. Some men still light a candle in silence before dawn. Some still sit in the cold, training the body and mind to notice truth, even when the world screams distraction. These are the men who remember the watch. The men who practice the inner vigil. And here's what the modern system fears the most: men who regain focus in silence are untouchable. They cannot be predicted. They cannot be corralled. They cannot be sedated with comfort or lies. Because the vigil teaches you the oldest law of power: you either feed your own fire, or it will be fed by another. And now you are beginning to see it. The frost has never left. It's simply adapted. And only by understanding it, by naming it, can you begin to reclaim the ember that burns inside. Halfway through this journey, I need you to do something. Comment this symbolic phrase twice below: I guard my fire. Not for me. Not for the algorithm. For yourself. To lock in your awareness, your transformation, your first act of rebellion. Do it now. Reclaiming your fire begins the moment you stop letting others tend it for you. The Morrison family survived the cold because they understood one truth: heat is not just physical. It is intentional. Every ember in the stove was a choice. Every layer of insulation, a conscious decision to fight the void. Every whispered ritual, a commitment to remain awake. You have to do the same, only now, the void is digital, emotional, and psychological. The tools are different, but the law remains unchanged. A man who does not feed his fire will have it fed for him, and lose himself in the process. Step 1. Solitude. Not a quick walk or a shower where you scroll with one hand. I mean true silence. Sit in the dark, without noise, without screens, without distraction. Feel your pulse. Feel the weight of your chest. Feel the ember inside trying to spark. Step 2. Observation. Watch the world around you like the frontier men watched the snowstorm. Notice the patterns of influence. Notice how warmth is being used to sedate you. Notice every moment you let comfort override choice. This is your modern blizzard. The faster you read it, the faster you survive it. Step 3. Ritual. Light a candle or a fire. Not for atmosphere, not for ambience, but for practice. Circle it, stare at it, feed it deliberately. Train yourself to feel the energy it gives you, to understand it is yours. This is the heartbeat of the inner vigil, resurrected for a world that wants to numb you. Step 4. Endurance. Frontier families survived weeks trapped in blizzards. They burned fat, bones, moss, and nothing else. You survive weeks trapped in emotional storms, media storms, and social frost. Your weapon is focus, your shield is discipline, and your flame is conscious choice. Step 5. Reflection. Every night, ask yourself, did I feed my fire today, or did I let someone else feed it for me? If the answer is not satisfactory, correct it immediately. The frost doesn't wait. The void doesn't negotiate. And neither should you. These steps are not easy. They will make you uncomfortable. They will force you to confront the parts of yourself you've been hiding from. But discomfort is the test, and fire cannot grow in comfort. And once you master these simple, ancient methods, something begins to shift. Your mind sharpens. Your instincts awaken. Your awareness stretches beyond what screens, noise, and warmth ever allowed. And then, only then, you start to feel it. The ember Thomas Morrison and his ancestors guarded. The fire that cannot be bought, sold, or controlled. The fire that lives in a man who refuses to sleep while the world tells him he is safe. This is not a game. This is survival. This is awakening. Now, we descend deeper, into the dangerous knowledge that kept frontier families alive while the unprepared perished. The Morrison family didn't merely survive winter nights. They mastered them. Every snowstorm was a lesson in anticipation, every failed ember a test of ingenuity. And some of the methods they used were deliberately hidden, because the moment outsiders understood them, they could weaponize them or fail them entirely. First, they mastered the body. The cold teaches you limits you never knew existed. Every frostbitten finger, every aching muscle, every shivering breath is a signal, adapt or die. Thomas Morrison trained his children to move without panic, to manage oxygen, to keep circulation flowing even when numbness set in. They learned to shift blood, flex joints, and breathe slowly, an intuitive dance between suffering and control. It wasn't comfortable. It wasn't easy. But it built a body that could endure any frost. Second, they mastered isolation. Weeks alone in a cabin is not just survival. It's confrontation with yourself. The mind whispers doubts, fears, and lies to weaken the body. But the Morrisons didn't listen, they observed. They tracked their thoughts as one would track wolves through snow. They acknowledged fear without surrendering to it. They treated isolation like a teacher, not a punishment. Third, they mastered resource. They didn't hoard blindly. They studied patterns of wood, snow, wind, and ice. They knew which moss burned longer, which logs smoldered, which animal fat extended flame for hours. They built systems within systems, insulation within walls, layers within layers, contingency plans for when every plan failed. Nothing was left to chance. Every action had a purpose. Every ember had a role. And fourth, the forbidden knowledge, ritual. They whispered to the fire. They circled it. They spoke in the tongue of ancestors. They left symbolic marks to remind themselves of vigilance, endurance, and awareness. Modern men call this superstition. Frontier men called it survival. Why? Because survival is more than mechanics. It is psychology, discipline, and the ability to stare into chaos without blinking. And here's the edge most people miss: this knowledge is dangerous. It forces you to confront the fragility of life. It teaches you control over body and mind in ways the modern world has intentionally dulled. Once you learn it, you cannot be the same. The world prefers men who obey comfort. It fears men who understand the fire inside them. This is the hidden lineage of power, endurance, and resistance, knowledge that has survived centuries because it works. And now, for the first time in generations, you are hearing it. The ember is yours to claim, if you have the courage to endure the frost that guards it. When the blizzards came, they didn't merely make the Morrison family uncomfortable, they tried to kill them. Imagine the wind howling like a living predator, snowdrifts piling higher than a man, and temperatures plunging past anything you've ever felt. The cabin groaned under the weight of ice. Every surface outside glistened with frost that could pierce skin in seconds. This was no scene for the weak. Thomas Morrison had contingency plans for every failure. The fire might go out. The roof might leak. Supplies might dwindle. Yet even in these dire moments, his mind remained sharp, and his family followed his lead. Step 1: Microclimate Mastery. Inside the cabin, he created layers of insulation that weren't obvious: moss stuffed into cracks, animal furs woven into walls, mud-packed crevices sealing every draft. Each layer was calculated to trap heat, redistribute air, and slow the advance of cold. Modern engineers might marvel at the ingenuity, yet it came from observation, not textbooks. Step 2: The ember rotation. Fires burn unevenly. Too hot, and the logs consume themselves. Too low, and the cold seeps in. Thomas monitored embers constantly, moving coals, reigniting logs, even burning moss strategically to maintain a 12-hour flame with minimal fuel. Every ember had a purpose. Every flame was life. Step 3: Rationing and pacing. Food wasn't just sustenance, it was energy for survival. Meals were small, carefully measured, and timed to match exertion. Overeat, and you risk lethargy. Undereat, and the body freezes from within. Even water was controlled: melted snow boiled, then cooled, preventing frostbite from extreme consumption or contamination. Step 4: Psychological Mastery. The greatest threat wasn't frostbite. It was surrender. Every child in the cabin was trained to focus on the fire, not the storm. Thomas circled with them, whispering commands, teaching visualization, seeing warmth as an extension of willpower, not chance. Fear became a tool, not a master. Step 5: Emergency Rituals. When embers died completely, Thomas didn't panic. He lit emergency fires, hidden under ashes, prepped in advance for moments of failure. These were rituals both physical and psychological, symbols reminding them that surrender was never an option, even when the world outside seemed ready to claim their lives. This wasn't just survival. It was mastery over chaos. The frontier tested body, mind, and spirit simultaneously, a crucible where only the vigilant endured. And here's what most men fail to realize: these lessons aren't lost to time. They live inside you as potential. You just have to dare to step into the storm, metaphorically, and reclaim the ember that has been waiting, dormant, through centuries of seduction and frost. The methods that kept the Morrisons alive in the frontier are not just relics of the past. They are blueprints for self-mastery and mental resilience, if you know how to read them. Consider the cold, a natural, undeniable adversary. In the frontier, it forced men to act, to anticipate, to endure. In the modern world, adversity is often invisible. It comes as distraction, manipulation, and internal weakness. But the principle is the same: your response defines your survival. The first lesson is awareness of your environment. Thomas Morrison didn't just notice the storm outside, he noticed every detail inside the cabin, every draft, every ember, every whisper of danger. Today, you must notice the patterns around you, the algorithms shaping your decisions, the media molding your emotions, the societal expectations that numb your vigilance. Awareness is your first weapon. Second, resourcefulness under pressure. Frontier families turned moss, mud, and animal hair into insulation. They converted logs and coals into 12 hours of life-saving warmth. You can turn your skills, knowledge, and focus into survival tools, mental, emotional, financial, but only if you refuse to rely on systems designed to keep you passive. Third, ritualized discipline. The fire circle wasn't superstition. It was practice, training the mind to focus, the body to endure, the soul to remain unbroken. Modern men can replicate this through meditation, deliberate practice, fasting, controlled discomfort, or even daily silence. These rituals recalibrate your will, the same way frontier fire kept bodies and minds alive. Fourth, psychological endurance. The Morrison children learned to fear the cold, respect it, and yet act with unwavering determination. Modern adversity often masquerades as comfort, the numbness of scrolling, the fake warmth of validation, the seduction of distraction. Endurance today is the ability to face discomfort without surrendering to it. And fifth, preparation for chaos. Frontier blizzard struck without warning. Every failure could mean death. Today, chaos is less visible but just as lethal: financial crashes, manipulative systems, or mental traps. The key is foresight, planning, and adaptability. Those who prepare internally survive externally. These principles are dangerous knowledge, because once you adopt them, you no longer accept control by systems, comfort, or distractions. You become the fire. You become the vigilant. And that's why this knowledge has been hidden, suppressed, and ridiculed for centuries. Because fire, once reignited inside a man, cannot be taken. It demands action. It demands discipline. It demands truth. And the moment you claim it, you will see the world as it really is, not a place of comfort, but a landscape of frost, waiting to test who is awake and who is sedated. The storm that winter was unlike any the Morrisons had faced before. It began quietly, almost innocuously, a light dusting of snow in the early morning. By midday, it had grown into a relentless howl, whipping the plains with sheets of ice, bending trees, and filling the horizon with a blinding white. The temperature dropped so quickly that the breath froze in midair before it could even reach the ground. Inside the cabin, the fire fought for its life. The embers glowed faintly, gasping for air. Every log had been consumed faster than usual, leaving Thomas Morrison with the knowledge that if the flame went out completely, the family would face a night in absolute darkness and frost. Death would not wait. He called the children together. Not with panic, not with noise, but with the quiet authority of a man who has stared death in the face before. He reminded them of every ritual, every contingency, every discipline they had practiced. Every step of the vigil became a commandment: rotate the embers, layer the insulation, conserve energy, focus the mind. Hours passed, and the storm intensified. Snow seeped through cracks in the walls. The youngest child shivered uncontrollably, the frost biting through quilts and furs. Thomas took her into his arms, whispering not lullabies, but instructions. Breath control, mental focus, visualization of warmth. Every child participated, moving with purpose, chanting silently, tending the embers. Outside, the wind howled as if aware of their defiance. The cold was a predator, and they were its prey. Yet inside, an ember of rebellion burned stronger than ever. It was not merely fire, it was awareness, discipline, and will fused into a single force. The night stretched endlessly. Each hour was measured, not by clocks, but by the flicker of embers, the rhythm of breath, the hum of survival. Hunger gnawed, muscles ached, frost bit, yet surrender was impossible. Every action was deliberate, every movement a victory over instinct to panic. When dawn finally arrived, the storm had passed. The cabin was battered, the world outside a frozen wasteland. But inside, they were alive. Not just alive in body, but alive in awareness, in mastery of fear, in command over their own fate. And in that moment, Thomas Morrison realized something his children would carry for life: fire is more than warmth. Fire is consciousness. Fire is will. And a man, any man, who masters his fire can endure not just storms, but the manipulations and illusions that seek to freeze his mind and soul. The Morrisons survived because they understood that survival is not luck. Survival is a deliberate act of vigilance, courage, and knowledge that most men never learn. The lesson of the Morrisons is not locked in history. It is alive, waiting for men who refuse to be sedated by comfort, distraction, and illusion. Look around. The storms we face today are no longer snow and wind, they are screens, notifications, news cycles, and endless entertainment designed to keep your mind pliable. The cold that threatens your survival is not frostbite, it is distraction. The hunger that gnaws at your potential is not from lack of food, it is from lack of focus. The blizzards are now algorithms, manipulating emotions and attention, shaping desires, and molding obedience. And yet, the same principles apply. Awareness first. Just as Thomas Morrison observed every shift in the storm, you must watch the patterns in your world, the forces that seek to numb your fire. Notice when your attention is stolen, when your mind is pacified with false warmth, when your actions serve another's agenda instead of your own. Awareness is the ember that signals life in darkness. Resourcefulness second. The Morrisons turned moss and mud into insulation. Today, you must turn knowledge, discipline, and self-control into tools that shield you from mental frost. Every skill you develop, every book you read, every habit you cultivate is like adding a log to your stove, prolonging warmth, sustaining clarity, defending your mind. Ritual third. The fire circle wasn't a game, it was practice. Modern equivalents are meditation, deliberate discomfort, physical training, or daily reflection. These rituals train the mind to endure adversity, to resist sedation, and to sharpen will. Without them, you will be consumed by distraction, just as a cabin with no fire is consumed by frost. Endurance fourth. The frontier winter demanded patience, strength, and repetition. The modern landscape demands the same, resisting impulses, mastering focus, and embracing discomfort. Every time you resist mindless scrolling, every time you confront the truth instead of the easy lie, you practice endurance. And reflection fifth. Each night, ask yourself, did I feed my own fire today, or did I allow someone else to feed it for me? The moment you take ownership, you reclaim the vigilance that systems, algorithms, and illusions have tried to steal. The frost of today is silent, seductive, and invisible. But the ember inside you still beats, ancient, waiting, capable of awakening awareness and power that the modern world fears. And if you commit to it, you begin to realize something dangerous: you are no longer just surviving. You are becoming untouchable. The fire inside you is the same force that once kept men alive through deathly winters. And now, it can keep your mind and spirit alive through the storms of manipulation and deceit. Modern institutions are masters of frost. But unlike the storms Thomas Morrison faced, this frost is subtle, invisible, and far more dangerous. It doesn't freeze your body. It freezes your mind. Education, media, entertainment, even social norms, all designed to sedate vigilance. To make obedience feel natural. To replace action with passive consumption. You are trained from childhood to follow patterns, to accept warmth without questioning where it comes from. Comfort becomes a leash, and the leash feels like freedom. Every system depends on this. Governments, corporations, banks, platforms, they thrive on the same principle the digital frost uses: keep the ember contained, but never let it ignite. Take education. The frontier children learn survival through experience, observation, and risk. Modern schools teach schedules, obedience, memorization, safe, controlled, predictable. Curiosity is optional. Independent thought is punished by grades, by ridicule, by invisibility. Take media. The frontier fire taught observation, discernment, and focus. Modern news delivers emotion in fragments: outrage, fear, distraction, so your mind burns energy on the superficial while your ember lies dormant. Take social conformity. The frontier cabin demanded cooperation for survival, but not blind submission. Modern society demands obedience disguised as belonging. If you resist, ridicule and isolation follow. Most men accept comfort over courage. They trade vigilance for approval. This is the frost of institutions. And it works because it's invisible. Because it doesn't feel like oppression. It feels like life. But here's the dangerous truth: the ember inside you doesn't care about visibility. It doesn't care if the world thinks you are safe, comfortable, or compliant. It only reacts to your choice to feed it. The moment you recognize these systems, the moment you see the frost for what it is, you step out of their control. You become immune to the seduction of synthetic warmth. You learn to trust your own vigilance. The methods of the Morrisons, observation, ritual, endurance, reflection, are no longer just survival tools for winter. They are mental armor. Psychological weapons. Codes for reclaiming autonomy. And here's the part the world fears most: men who master their own ember are unpredictable. They are impossible to manipulate. They cannot be sedated by distraction, misled by comfort, or corralled by fear. You are being trained in silence right now. The fire you feed is not just for survival. It is for freedom. And once it ignites fully, no frost, physical, digital, or institutional, can ever touch you again. There is a lineage of knowledge few men are ever allowed to see, a hidden curriculum that stretches from frontier families to secret societies, from survivalists to elite strategists. These men understood a truth the world does not want you to remember: mastery over self comes before mastery over circumstance. The Morrisons weren't exceptional by birth, they were exceptional by discipline. Every fire tended, every frost endured, every crisis survived was a lesson in the mechanics of willpower. They knew what the elites still know today: that physical survival, mental resilience, and spiritual vigilance are inseparable. Hidden societies, from the old Masonic orders to warrior clans in remote regions, preserved the same principles. Observation, ritual, endurance, and reflection, these were never just survival tactics. They were protocols for power. Knowledge that allows a man to resist manipulation, to see the patterns behind authority, to act decisively when the masses remain paralyzed by comfort. The modern world tries to erase this memory. History books sanitize, governments simplify, and media entertains. Yet beneath the surface, these methods survive, coded in stories, rituals, and the hidden teachings of those who refuse to surrender. And now, you are being initiated. Every section you have absorbed is a key. Every warning, every observation, every method is a piece of the map leading back to your ember. The first principle: vigilance over environment. The frontier taught that survival requires constant awareness of wind, temperature, wood, snow. Today, it means awareness of influence, distraction, manipulation, and seduction. Know the frost before it finds you. The second principle: discipline of body and mind. Cold exposure trained muscles and nerves. Mental practices trained focus and will. In modern terms, this is deliberate discomfort, meditation, fasting, and rigorous training, exercises that reclaim control over your own state. The third principle: ritual as reinforcement. Repetition, observation, and symbolism bind consciousness to intention. Light a candle. Walk in silence. Perform deliberate actions that remind your mind you are not passive. You are awake. You are alive. And the fourth, resilience under chaos. Storms do not ask permission. Systems of control do not announce themselves. The man who endures, who rises when the world seeks to numb him, cannot be broken. The frost may change form. It may disguise itself as comfort, distraction, or approval. But the ember you tend is eternal. If you feed it now, if you commit to vigilance, the modern frost loses its power. And once you reclaim that fire, you can walk through the coldest storms of history, society, and self, unbowed, unbroken, unstoppable. When a man truly masters his ember, something extraordinary happens. It's not just warmth or survival. It's perception. It's the ability to see patterns others miss. To anticipate deception, manipulation, and danger. To act decisively while the world hesitates. This is the power frontier families cultivated out of necessity, the same power hidden from modern men, waiting for those willing to reclaim it. The ember trains the senses. Distraction fades. Comfort loses its grip. You begin to notice the subtle frost around you, the false warmth of validation, the calculated seduction of algorithms, the invisible structures that shape obedience. The world is no longer a passive backdrop. It becomes a map of opportunity, a landscape you can navigate with clarity. Emotional control becomes instinctual. Where most men react impulsively, your responses are deliberate. Fear is no longer paralyzing, it is a signal, a teacher, a compass pointing toward action. Anxiety becomes fuel for focus. Pain becomes a guide for endurance. And every small victory reinforces the flame inside. The Morrisons knew this in the frontier. Each blizzard they survived, each night they endured without surrender, trained their minds to operate under pressure, to trust instincts, and to act with precision when everything around them screamed chaos. Modern men have forgotten this. But the principle is unchanged: mastery over self is the ultimate survival skill. This mastery creates presence, a force that others feel even if they do not understand it. A man with an ember alive inside him commands attention, earns respect without words, and moves through the world with authority born of discipline, endurance, and awareness. People may not recognize what he possesses, but they will instinctively respond to it. And here is the dangerous part: once this ember is stoked, once vigilance becomes a habit, the world will attempt to extinguish it. Seduction, distraction, ridicule, manipulation, all will be deployed against you. The frost will adapt, just as it always has. The difference is now, you are prepared. You will not panic. You will not surrender. You will recognize the patterns, respond deliberately, and emerge stronger every time. This is why the knowledge of frontier survival, of ritual, of endurance, of observation, is not merely historical curiosity. It is a blueprint for personal sovereignty. It is a map for reclaiming autonomy in a world designed to make men compliant, sedated, and predictable. And once the ember burns fully, you will understand the ultimate truth: the world fears men who control their own fire. Now, the battlefield is no longer snow or blizzard. It is the mind. And the weapons are invisible. Every notification, every advertisement, every curated image is a frostspike aimed directly at your ember. Every trivial drama, every conflict, every emotional provocation is designed to fragment your focus, scatter your energy, and extinguish vigilance without you even noticing. But the ember is resilient if trained. You can defend it, deliberately, methodically, strategically. Step 1. Control input. The frontier men controlled their environment because it was life or death. Modern men must do the same with information. Limit exposure to manipulation. Choose your content like you choose fuel for a fire, with precision and purpose. Noise kills attention. Attention is fuel. Step 2, deliberate action. Do not react. Observe. Analyze. Decide. Most men exist on autopilot, reacting to every impulse. The ember grows dim in reaction. It grows fierce in deliberate action. Pause before speaking, before engaging, before consuming. Let your mind reclaim sovereignty. Step 3, ritual reinforcement. The Morrisons circled the fire, whispered instructions, repeated actions. You can replicate this. Morning reflection, journaling, meditation, controlled physical challenges, all bind the mind to discipline. Every act of deliberate repetition strengthens the ember and shields it from the frost outside. Step 4, discomfort training. Cold, hunger, fatigue, solitude, controlled exposure trains the body and mind to endure. Frontier men faced it naturally. Modern men must seek it deliberately. Ice baths, fasting, early rising, physical challenges, these reconnect the mind to the reality of survival, rather than seduction. Step 5, strategic isolation. Sometimes the ember must burn without distraction. Silence is the forge. Remove toxic influences, reduce unnecessary communication, detach from sources of manipulation. Observe yourself. Observe the world. The ember thrives when it is tended consciously, not scattered across distractions. Step 6, reflection and evaluation. Every evening, ask, did I feed my fire today? Did I defend it from distraction and manipulation? Did I act deliberately, not reactively? The frost is cunning, but awareness is lethal to it. These strategies are not comfortable. They are not easy. But the ember rewards discipline. And the moment you defend it successfully, a transformation begins. You are no longer just enduring life. You are mastering it. You are no longer at the mercy of manipulation. You are becoming the fire. Once the ember is alive and defended, perception changes. The world is no longer a passive landscape. It becomes a canvas, a map of hidden currents, frozen traps, and opportunities waiting to be claimed. The frost that enslaved the mind, distraction, manipulation, comfort, becomes visible. Patterns emerge. Intentions reveal themselves. The small lies, the subtle manipulations, the invisible pressures, all are now detectable because the ember trains your awareness like a sharpened blade cutting through fog. Decision-making transforms. You no longer act blindly, nor do you respond impulsively. Every move is deliberate, every choice aligned with your fire. Fear becomes a signal, not a shackle. Chaos becomes a test, not a threat. The ember turns adversity into insight, pressure into clarity, and threat into opportunity. Influence follows naturally. People sense presence, awareness, and mastery. You do not coerce, you radiate authority. The ember communicates what words cannot. Subtle gestures, unwavering posture, calm composure, all declare, this man commands his fire. And in that authority lies unseen power, the kind that eludes men sedated by comfort or distraction. The world's frost adapts, always, but the ember adapts faster. The Morrisons understood this instinctively. Each storm taught them new methods of endurance, each blizzard revealed hidden weaknesses in their systems, each near failure forced innovation. Modern men must do the same, constantly recalibrate, test boundaries, expose weaknesses, and strengthen the mind against the subtle frost of societal sedation. And here is the ultimate secret: when a man becomes fire-conscious, he becomes invisible to manipulation. Algorithms, social pressures, cultural norms, none can control him without his permission. They may attempt to tempt, distract, or seduce, but he moves with clarity, guided only by the ember inside. This is dangerous knowledge. Dangerous because most men will never seek it. Dangerous because once it is obtained, life becomes sharper, clearer, more intentional. It is no longer safe to exist passively. And it is no longer acceptable to surrender control. The ember is more than warmth. It is awareness. It is power. It is sovereignty over self and environment. And the moment you fully embrace it, the frost no longer threatens your survival. It merely tests your mastery, and you pass, again and again, growing stronger with every storm. The final frontier is not snow, wind, or blizzard. It is the human mind, and the frost that dwells within, fear, doubt, laziness, and illusion. Frontier families mastered the external cold first, then the internal. The Morrisons knew that survival depended not only on fire and insulation, but on unbroken will. The body is merely a vessel. The mind is the battlefield. The ember is the weapon. To reach ultimate sovereignty, a man must confront every layer of internal frost. Doubt, recognize it, dissect it, and refuse to obey its whispers. Fear, feel it, study it, and use it as a compass toward action. Laziness, identify it, expose it, and replace it with disciplined ritual. Illusion, strip away every comforting lie society tells, and stare at reality unflinchingly. Frontier strategies were brutal. They trained endurance through suffering, sharpened awareness through danger, and disciplined the mind through necessity. You can apply the same methods today, though the storms are psychological, social, and digital. Deliberate discomfort, controlled fasting, silence, physical challenge, observation, and reflection, these are the modern embers of the same ancient fire. The Morrisons would pace the cabin, rotate the embers, whisper instructions, and meditate over every detail of survival. Modern men must do the same with attention, energy, and will. Every distraction avoided is a log added to the fire. Every deliberate choice strengthens the ember. Every act of vigilance trains sovereignty. And here's the hidden truth few ever realize: ultimate personal mastery is dangerous to the systems around you. It defies control, refuses manipulation, and radiates authority that cannot be legislated, bought, or silenced. Those who achieve it walk through life untouchable, immune to seduction, distraction, and the soft frost of societal pressure. The ember transforms perception, endurance, and influence into a single force. It fuses body, mind, and spirit into something primal, ancient, and invincible. Men who master this fire are no longer mere survivors. They are architects of their destiny, untethered by the frost that ensnares others. The final principle is this: feed the ember relentlessly, defend it without compromise, and use it as a guide through every storm, internal and external. Once you claim this knowledge, once you claim this fire, there is no turning back. You are no longer passive. You are no longer sedated. You are the fire itself, untouchable, eternal, sovereign. The awakening of full vigilance is not a quiet moment. It is seismic. Once the ember is mastered, life no longer unfolds in fog. Every decision, every interaction, every threat, and every opportunity becomes crystal clear. You see the patterns others cannot. You anticipate the frost before it strikes. You act with precision while the masses remain paralyzed by comfort, distraction, and illusion. Leadership emerges naturally. Not through position or title, but through presence. The Morrisons didn't lead by decree, they led by example. Their mastery over fire, cold, and fear commanded attention, inspired courage, and ensured survival. Modern men, awakened to the ember, wield the same power. Influence radiates from discipline, resilience, and awareness, not words alone. The world's frost, the subtle manipulations, the seductions of convenience, the illusions of safety, loses its grip. You no longer need validation, approval, or permission. You no longer react blindly to chaos. The ember inside guides you, informs every choice, and transforms every challenge into a crucible for growth. This is dangerous knowledge. It changes perception, reshapes priorities, and rewires instinct. Once you see the patterns, you cannot unsee them. Once you feel the fire, you cannot ignore it. It is a sovereign force, ancient and relentless, capable of shaping reality itself. Legacy becomes inevitable. The mastery you cultivate is not only survival, it is influence. It is the power to guide, protect, and build systems that endure beyond yourself. The Morrisons survived winter storms, but they also passed knowledge down, knowledge of vigilance, of discipline, of fire. You, too, become a guardian of ancient wisdom, a beacon for men willing to walk through frost and emerge unbroken. And now, here is your call: reflect, commit, and transform. Begin to feed your ember daily. Observe the frost around you. Embrace discomfort. Train your mind and body. Perform ritual. Build resilience. And remember, every small act of vigilance adds fuel to the fire that will define your life, your influence, and your legacy. Men who master this knowledge are rare, dangerous, and unstoppable. They walk the world as both survivor and architect, both observer and executor. And you are on the threshold of joining them. Halfway here, it is time to lock in your transformation. Comment below, twice, the phrase, "I am the Ember." This is not ritual. It is a declaration of sovereignty. A mark that your mind has recognized the fire inside. 2 comments. One for your body, one for your mind. Seal it. This is the final descent, the ultimate revelation. The ember is not just warmth, not just survival, not just resilience. It is sovereignty. It is vision. It is power that cannot be taken, manipulated, or frozen by anyone or anything. The frontier families, the Morrisons, mastered the physical storm so they could conquer the internal one. The fire they tended was more than heat, it was consciousness, focus, and unwavering will. And now, that same fire burns within you. But it is not yet fully claimed. The frost of distraction, manipulation, and seduction still presses. The world still attempts to seduce, numb, and dominate. It is your choice whether to yield or rise. Every principle you have absorbed matters. Awareness, observation, resourcefulness, ritual, endurance, reflection, they are no longer abstract. They are weapons and shields. The ember demands action. Feed it daily. Test it against challenge. Let discomfort sharpen it. Let adversity temper it. Every trial is fuel. Every obstacle is a teacher. Once fully ignited, the ember transforms everything. You see the unseen. You anticipate danger and opportunity. You influence without forcing. You lead by presence. You endure when others falter. You move with precision when chaos reigns. You are no longer passive. You are fire incarnate. And here is the final, dangerous truth few ever realize: fire changes not only you, but the world around you. The moment you burn brightly, the frost recoils. Manipulation fails. Seduction falters. Systems of control stumble against your vigilance. You are untouchable, not because you are untouchable to physical force, but because your mind, body, and spirit operate in alignment that defies ordinary control. Now, the choice is yours: remain cold, sedated, and at the mercy of the invisible frost, or embrace the ember and become the architect of your own reality. Stand vigilant. Feed the fire. Protect it fiercely. Let it consume doubt, fear, and weakness until only sovereignty remains. History, modern manipulation, and the coldest nights of the frontier have one lesson: those who master the ember survive, and those who survive with it shape destiny. Comment one last time: I am the ember, and commit. Let this fire guide your path, transform your perception, and define your legacy. The frost will test you, always. But now, you are prepared. Now, you are awake. Now, you are untouchable. The ember is yours. Guard it. Nourish it. And never let it die.